In 1919, the most powerful men on planet Earth gathered to redraw the map of Europe after World War I and accidentally invented a brand new country because two guys with a compass couldn't make circles touch. Not a metaphorical compass, an actual physical geometry class compass, the pointy thing you stabbed your friend with in seventh grade. And the nation born from this drafting mistake? A tiny strip of German wine country that Berlin functionally forgot existed, whose entire economy became wine smuggling, whose currency was backed by alcohol, and whose single greatest military achievement was stealing an entire train. This is the Free State of Bottleneck. Yes, Bottleneck. And no, I am not making a single word of this up. So let's set the stage. It's late 1918. Germany has just lost World War I in spectacular fashion, and the Allies are feeling, let's say, vindictive. As part of the armistice, they decide to occupy the entire west bank of the Rhine River, plus 3 bridgeheads on the east bank, basically footholds around the cities of Cologne, Koblenz, and Mainz, just in case Germany got any funny ideas about round 2. The British took Cologne, the Americans took Koblenz, and the French took Mainz. And here's how these highly sophisticated occupation zones were designed. Somebody took a map, jammed a compass point into each city, and drew a semicircle with a 30-kilometer radius around each one. That's it. That was the master plan. 30 kilometers because it's a nice round number, and geopolitics is apparently just arts and crafts. Now, here's the thing about circles, and I want you to really absorb this because the finest diplomatic minds of 1918 apparently did not. Circles are round, and if the centers of 2 circles are more than 60 kilometers apart, 2 30-kilometer circles will not touch. Mainz and Koblenz, more than 60 kilometers apart. So when the semicircle around Mainz and the semicircle around Koblenz got drawn onto the map, a skinny little sliver of land was left between them, occupied by absolutely nobody. A gap. A crack between the couch cushions of European diplomacy. And because of its shape, wide at one end, narrow at the other, the locals looked at it and said, "Huh, looks like a bottle." Which, in a wine region, is basically prophecy. This unoccupied sliver contained the towns of Lorch and Kaub on the Rhine, a handful of tiny villages in the hills, and roughly 17,000 extremely confused Germans. Now you'd think, okay, no occupation. That's a win, right? They're free. Wrong. So catastrophically wrong. Because while the bottleneck was technically still part of Germany, it was surrounded on 3 sides by Allied occupation zones, and on the 4th side by the Rhine itself, which the French patrolled. The railway lines ran through occupied territory, so trains just stopped coming. The roads out were blocked. The German government in Berlin couldn't send money, couldn't send food, couldn't send coal, couldn't even reliably send mail. These people were citizens of a country that could no longer physically reach them. They were Germany's forgotten voicemail. So what did the people of the bottleneck do? Did they panic? Did they starve quietly and politely as one does? No. On January 10th, 1919, the mayor of Lorch, a man named Edmund Neischik, and yes, that spelling is correct. No, I will not be pronouncing it again, stood up and essentially declared, fine, fine. If nobody wants us, we'll be our own country. And thus was born the Freistaat Flaschenhals, the Free State of Bottleneck. Population, 17,000. Head of state, a small town mayor. National industry, wine. National anthem, presumably also wine. And this is where things go from quirky historical footnote to genuinely unhinged survival thriller. Because a micronation of vineyard workers still needs to eat, and grapes tragically are not a food group, their first problem was money. German cash literally could not be delivered into the region. So the bottleneck did what any self-respecting fake country would do. They printed their own emergency currency issued by the towns themselves. And since nobody in their right mind trusts paper printed by a nation the size of a hiking trail, the money was effectively backed by the one asset they had in absurd abundance: wine. Their financial system was, functionally, This note is good for booze. Honestly, more stable than some actual currencies of the era, and I'm only half joking because Germany was about 2 years away from wheelbarrow money hyperinflation. But paper solves nothing if there's no food to buy, which brings us to the bottleneck's true national pastime: smuggling. And not smuggling as a crime, smuggling as a public service. Whole convoys of villagers would slip through the forests at night, hauling barrels of Rhine wine across the invisible border into occupied and unoccupied Germany, then hauling back bread, meat, and supplies. The French patrols tried to stop them. The French patrols failed constantly. You cannot outsneak a wine farmer on his home mountain. That man has been carrying heavy liquids up steep hills his entire life. He was built for this. The bottleneck essentially became a state-sponsored bootlegging operation with a mayor for a president, where crossing the border with contraband wasn't shameful. It was Tuesday. And then came the coal train. Oh, the coal train. Winter is coming, the Free State is freezing, and coal shipments to the bottleneck are, say it with me, impossible. But coal trains for the French kept rolling right past them through the occupied zone. So, a group of bottleneck railwaymen allegedly looked at one of those fully loaded French coal trains sitting near Rudesheim and had the single most beautiful thought in micronational history: what if it just came with us? They hijacked it. They straight up commandeered an entire coal train and drove it into the Free State, where the tracks conveniently dead-ended and the French couldn't follow without invading. A country of 17,000 people committed grand theft locomotive against a victorious world power. And won. That was their Battle of Trafalgar. Their Normandy. A stolen train full of rocks, and it kept the whole nation warm. For 4 glorious years this held. The bottleneck smuggled, farmed, printed wine money, dodged patrols, and existed in a legal dimension where German laws technically applied, but German enforcement absolutely did not. But all bottles get corked eventually. In early 1923, Germany fell behind on war reparations, and France responded by occupying the entire Ruhr industrial region. And while they were at it, in February 1923, French troops finally marched into the bottleneck too. No epic last stand, no dramatic siege. The compass gap that created the country was simply erased by boots on the ground. The Free State of Bottleneck went out the way it came in, as a technicality. When the Rhineland occupation eventually wound down years later, the sliver quietly rejoined regular, boring Germany, and most of the world forgot it had ever existed, which is thematically perfect, since being forgotten was its origin story. But here's the kicker. The bottleneck refuses to stay dead. Today, the winemakers of Lorch and Kaub have resurrected the Freistaat Flaschenhals as a brand. You can visit, drink wine bottled under the Free State label, and even pick up a novelty bottleneck passport. The fake country born from a geometry error is now a tourism gimmick that sells the exact product it once smuggled. That's not just a happy ending, that's a business model. So, what's the takeaway here? Maybe it's that world leaders should be legally required to pass 10th grade geometry before signing armistices. Maybe it's that 17,000 Germans with wine and spite are more resilient than most empires. Or maybe it's simpler. If the greatest powers on Earth ever forget you exist because of a stationery accident, don't wait for permission. Print your own money, steal a train, and declare yourself a country. Worst case, it becomes a wine label. And hey, if you enjoy stories about history's most gloriously stupid decisions, do what the diplomats of 1918 couldn't and close the gap. Smash that subscribe button for Sticky Storm. Because trust me, humanity has never stopped making mistakes this good.